Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome Reverend Amy Shaw, who is our designated transition specialist for our upcoming senior ministerial search. Reverend Shaw serves as the full-time settled minister for Lake Country UU Church in Heartland, Wisconsin. The Mid-America region has hired her to work with a variety of congregations as they go through transition. So she brings invaluable experiences to us and our UCE community. We're very grateful that she joins us here today. Reverend Shaw graduated from Meadville in 2013. She was a college professor and a nursing executive before she became a minister. In all her spare time, Amy's a mixed media artist. She's also the author of both a science fiction fantasy book and a humor book about cats. We know that we'll benefit greatly from her many talents, so join me in welcoming Reverend Amy Shaw.
Jean, thank you for making me sound much more impressive than I really am. And greetings to you all from the Mid-America region and from Lake Country UU, where I serve as the senior minister. I am quite excited and happy to be here with you all today. As you can tell, I was chosen for this job because I am quiet, shy, and retiring. So we are going to have an amazing search process. Are you all ready for this? All right. This is the first time you will see me, but probably not the last. I am here to journey with you through this whole process. And we have found that this is much less frightening and much more helpful if there is somebody with you all the way who is here to answer questions, support you, be there when it gets a little nerve-wracking. I'm going to be here. I'll be here with your search committee. I'll be here with your board. I'm accessible by phone and email. So they will always have me as a reference. We're going to try to keep this meeting today to a reasonable length because while I know you all love to spend the entirety of Sunday at church, I want to give you a broad outline and some good information that you need. We're going to talk about how getting a search committee works, and then I'm going to turn it back over because we have some slides that Jean and the board want to show you. We will open it up for questions twice, once after I speak and then once after she's done, to make sure that anything that is in your head that you are concerned about, you have a chance to say to us today, hey, I'm worried about this, or hey, I'm thinking about this, or hey, I have no clue what the heck you just said. Fill me in a little better. So let me start by saying, what the heck is a regional transitions coach? Some of you may remember the old system. How many of you have been on a search committee or been through a search here? All right, so you remember parts of the old system. You had a ministerial settlement rep that was with you. A lot of what they did was similar, but not all of it, and the system worked just a little differently. We keep tweaking. We don't have it right yet, but we're closer. Our job is to be with you through the process. We are your sounding board. We are selected from among ministers who, in general, theoretically know what we are doing. This is not a guarantee. I may still get things wrong. When I do, say to me, oh no, that's a mistake. Here, I know better. I'll listen. Again, we are with you through the whole process, from the time you begin all the way up till you call a minister. We work in parallel with your interim. I am not ever a replacement for, I hold no authority at your church, and let me say this from the beginning, The UUA does not have the authority to tell you you must do anything. I will over and over suggest to you here is best practices as our association has determined. And over, you are free to tell me to put that in my hat and smoke it. The power of the search lies within the congregation. So I just want to stress that it lies within your board and within your search committee. I am help. I am not authority. So, how does this stuff work? We started out about 2 weeks ago when I came by Zoom and met with your board to give them a big, broad overview. And I was delighted when I started to talk to your board to find out that they were already thinking ahead of this process. They wanted to make sure you had every possible minute to select a search committee that represented you. So they had already begun to put the work in to figure out how to do parts of the search committee selection. You all are perfectly positioned at this point. You are dead on target. You're actually about 2 weeks ahead of the process because of the work your preparation and your board have already put in. So I speak to them first, and then I come in here today and I give you the overview. I give you relevant dates, and we're going to talk through that. I tell you how the process works. And one of the important things we're going to be talking about today is how a search committee works and what the makeup of that search committee should probably be. And more than that, what the makeup should not be. The search committee is one of the few things where it's not necessarily the right place for everybody who wants to do it. This is one of the most important tasks that you have as a church, is calling one out from among our association to serve you. And it's pretty important that you get people on that committee that represent who you are as a church, that speak to the body of who this congregation is, and that do it with an eye toward the whole, rather than their own personal wants and needs alone. One of the pieces of wisdom that we remind congregations over and over is that ministers come and go, but the congregation and the voice of the congregation is the church. And that is something throughout this process, and as you select your search committee, to remember they will be your voice for a year to 18-month period that ends in calling a minister who matches with you. Not who matches with your Facebook best of image. Not who matches with the airbrushed version, but who matches with you in all your perfect imperfection. Who matches with you in your goodness and your badness and your wholeness and your brokenness, and can help you to be who you want to be in the world. This is the greatest power you have as a congregation, and I am hopefully going to help you to use it wisely. Today we are going to talk about the theory and the way that we do settlement, and we're going to describe who has what responsibilities during search. If you have a burning question, I know there are a lot of folks like me where if they don't get their question answered immediately, they lose it. If you would happen to have a burning question and you know you cannot hold that question, that it'll go out of your head, please raise your hand and stop me. Other than that, I ask you to try to hold your question to the question period, but if the way you process things requires that you ask now or it'll be gone, get a hand up and I'll stop. So in search, this is not a job interview. You are calling a minister. You are not hiring one. This is not the power at the head of the pyramid. This is the power of the people asking one from among you to lead. And in order to do that well, you have to know who you are. You have to know your good, and you have to know your learning curve and your slightly battered edges. You have to know what it is you need a minister to come in here and do with you. You have to discover who's out there, which means you have to put together the materials to find them. The website, the packet, the congregational record, all the pieces that make ministers click on your packet to see what you're about. And you have to get to the end piece where you invite a minister or ministers to begin to interact through pre-candidating and then finally through candidating. You are not lost in the wilderness. Just because your former minister has left, this isn't like, and many of you may remember jobs, especially as much younger people, when you were 15 or 16 and they'd hire anybody. Breathing was the criteria. The reason search is so complex is that you want to match. This isn't about just filling the pulpit. This isn't, oh my goodness, we need, somebody has to be up here. And most of you know that. This is about, we want a good pairing. You want a minister who can grow with you. You want a minister where their skills match what you need. You want a minister who can deepen with you. So what is the interim work during this period? The interim work is very specific. It's finding out who you are. It's helping heal anything that needs immediate healing and fixing. It's helping you get ready. The interim may be doing cottage meetings, they may be doing listening sessions, they're figuring out what's going on. So what does the board do? If you've never been through search before, a lot of folks assume that it's the board's responsibility to do more than it is. The board's going to help you to create a search committee. That's big responsibility number one. To do that with integrity. To do that while listening to all of you. Surprisingly, they're going to produce a search committee budget. Search is pricey. You have to have enough to be able to bring in your pre-candidates and put them in a hotel so they can preach in a neutral pulpit for you. You have to be able to put up a candidate minister in a hotel for a week. You have to feed them, care for them, water them, try not to kill them. And I say this knowing that when I was in search the last time, we had a carbon monoxide issue in the church, and they turned off the detector and said, oh, it'll be fine. We had the fire trucks there, and I said, if you kill the candidate, you lose points. Surprisingly, they called me anyway. But you have to feed them. You have to fly them there if necessary. You have to get their family members there if necessary. You may want to provide luncheons or events during the week that they're there. It takes some money. And the board will determine what that looks like. They'll determine your ministerial compensation package. They will talk with the UUA. They will compare and contrast. They'll make sure that what you are offering is fair and equitable and in line with what churches across the country are offering, so that you don't have a minister taking you because either they're desperate and are willing to grab for anything, or that you're offering so much that every minister that's unemployed at the moment is looking at you. They're going to develop a negotiating team that will do the final negotiations. Because there's bits and bobs that you negotiate at the last minute, how much goes into salary and do they need extra to go into benefits, and it's the same package amount, just what goes where. But that doesn't sound like a lot of the work of Surge. That's a very small amount overall. So who is going to do the rest of the work? Now, for any of you who's been on the search committee before, you know the answer to this. You're going to have a trusted group of 5 to 7 people, your search committee, who can impartially represent the will of the congregation. This is one of the most rewarding tasks that you can do as a UU, because when all else fails, all kidding aside, this is the one thing that makes us quintessentially Unitarian Universalist, is our ability to not be dictated to who will speak from our pulpits. And exercising that right as a search committee member is one of the greatest exercises of democratic power that you have. It is rewarding. It is also busy. You will have about a year to 18 months of fairly busy work. The search committee is a committee of the congregation, not of the board. The search committee and the board will interact to make sure that this congregation is kept apprised of exactly what is going on. The only codicil is the identity of the ministers. All the way up until the search committee selects a candidate, they are responsible for the sanctity and the anonymity of those ministers in search. And I have congregations ask every year, well, why can't we know? Why can't we get that whole slate? Can you imagine everyone in this church having free access to the 10 or 15 names that have clicked on you? Going after that on Facebook and Google and every other place you can to figure out everything possible about these ministers, campaigning. That's the piece we avoid. We also do it for the ministers' protection, because many of us do not tell our current congregation that we are going into search, because we go into search for a variety of reasons. And we want to preserve our own congregation's health and well-being and anxiety levels, because unless we are actually leaving, you don't want a congregation over and over thinking, oh my gosh, they're pre-candidating this week. Are they going to leave us? Are they going to leave us? So we do this to protect congregations and ministers and your own congregation. So what do you commit to if you are on this search committee? You're going to commit to a 2-day retreat. You do that with me at the very beginning. It's not 2 whole days. It's usually a Friday evening and most of the day till 4 or 5 on Saturday. And in that time period, you decide who's doing which tasks. You learn what your role is more fully. You get access to all the materials that I've got on how to do this. We talk you through what steps are coming. Then you're going to begin to conduct surveys and focus groups and cottage conversations to explore what is the theology of this congregation. What are your demographics? Who are you? What do you expect out of this person that you will call your minister? Are they 35 with 25 years experience? Are they a single male with, 2 ex-wives and 3 kids? Are they a genderqueer woman? What do you want? What are the contradictions that you're hearing? What are the certainties? What things are you afraid of? That's going to be an important part of this too, is the honesty in where your fears are. A lot of times when I come in to do these, I come in my business suit and my tie. Because if a congregation is nervous about me as a gender-neutral individual, as a Middle Eastern and white individual, and they tell me, but we're fine calling a transgender minister, I'm going to say to you, really? Let's talk about that because I made you nervous and no one would shake my hand. And I will be with the search committee in that process of saying, where are our real fears? What's aspirational for us? What's possible for us? And how do we get over it? Because the best minister for you may look a whole bunch of different ways. So at some point in this process, we will probably do Beyond Categorical Thinking, which is an amazing workshop that's going to talk with you about not being afraid of all the differences that occur across the range of human possibility, but instead looking for who will take us where we want to go, who will move with us, who will journey with us, regardless of if they do it in a wheelchair or on 2 feet, regardless of what color they are or what gender orientation. So once the committee has done all that, they will begin to develop your congregational record, the most terrifying document ever to be clicked into a computer. The process has been made for anybody who's ever served before. The process is now all computerized. You can type things out on a Word document, cut and paste, and you are in there. No more writing it out by hand. I had one committee member on another church say, I was on the one before computers. I never want to do it again. Now we recommend you get Google Docs and Dropbox, and everything can be cut and paste and work at your own home and share it on Google Docs, and it's marvelous. That brings us to a piece, though, about computer literacy. Yes, it is possible to serve on the search committee if you are not computer literate. Obviously, do not volunteer to develop the website. But yes, it is possible. And if that is a strong demographic here of people who have marginal or non-existent computer literacy, then yeah, that probably should have some kind of representation. It does make life more difficult. You would have to work very mindfully to make sure that folks could get information in, that they could still at least use a word processing program or Microsoft Word if at all possible. But yes, it is possible. So don't let that stop you. And when everything else is done, the search committee will make sure that your website is appropriate for search, that it has all the information needed. We no longer tell churches that they have to have a search website. We tell them, fix your website. Make it look the way you want it to look. Get all the information there. And then use a program like Dropbox to share documents. If you've never been through this before, here's how it works. You get all that information together, and by January 2nd, you have it all in the computers. I have vetted all of it and said, yep, you've got it all there, and it represents you. It's authentic work. It's good to go. And I click yes, and then Keith Cron clicks yes at the UUA, and your packet goes live and into search. And ministers who are interested in what you've had to say about who you are can see that, and they can click on you. You will get a list of as many ministers as clicked on you. And starting on January 2nd, You can call them, you can email them, you can contact them, you can arrange Zoom calls or conference calls, in-person interviews. And when you find 2 or 3 or 5 or 1 that you like, you ask them to pre-candidate. This is still the search committee doing this work. And the search committee will hear those ministers preach at a neutral pulpit, a pulpit that is not the ministers and that is not here. Because it's too easy to be good in your own house. You want to hear them as neutrally as you can. So that search committee will go and they will listen to those ministers. And out of those ministers from 1 to 4 or 5, they will pick one to be your candidate. And when they have that name, they will bring that name back to you. And when that minister has said, yes, this year the date is March 29th, that you can offer a minister. Next year it'll be right about the same. So somewhere around March 29 of next year will be offering day. And if there is a candidate that your search committee loves, they will say to them, we want you to be our candidate. And that minister will say, yep, I would love to because you're awesome. And then they will come in and spend a week with you. They will preach 2 Sundays, one on either end. They will try to meet as many of you as possible. You will ask them everything you can think of and about 6 more questions. You will make sure that they are the one for you. And on that final Sunday, you will vote. Most of us are told to take a 90% or higher yes as a yes. Most of us get a 98 or a 99 or a 100 because the search committees do good work and they bring you good people. And then you will have a new minister. So the question before you now is, do I want to serve on the search committee? I know you were getting your sheets today. They had them after church, right? Passing them out at the end to nominate for the search committee. So let's talk about who is potentially amazing on the search committee. To be on that committee, you have to understand you're not just speaking for you. You are speaking for a demographic within this congregation. One of the exercises I do at the committee retreat is to say to them, who do you think you speak for? And I loved one of my gentlemen, he says, well, I'm obviously old white guys. And everybody started laughing, and somebody said to him, actually, no, you're not. You're newer members. You've only been here 2 years. So we will check in with each other and make sure that we've got the whole church in that room. And if somebody says to me when we're talking at that search committee retreat, well, you know what? Nobody here is deeply involved with music. Nobody. Wow, wait a minute, we don't have... And I will say to them, okay, so which one of you is going to make sure that voice comes into the room? Who can agree now to hear those voices, to mindfully pick up that demographic? And by the time we're done with that committee retreat, every member of that search committee knows, here's kind of who I'm speaking for. Here's the voices that I have to make sure come into the room. Not that you're going to poll only those people and say, well, it's 50 of them said this and 52 said not that. But you have to keep your finger on the pulse of that group. You have to kind of know what they want. And our goal is to get the whole church into that search committee room to make sure that every group is represented. Somebody at my last church said, well, we have a loud, grumpy group that hates everything we do. And I said, how big is your loud, grumpy group? And they said, oh, about 32 people. And I looked at the size of the church. I said, who here represents the loud, grumpy group? Because obviously that position is a strong one. I need somebody talking to the loud, grumpy group. So you have to be able to do that thinking outside your own head. You have to be able to listen. You have to be able to put the time in. That's not saying you can't miss a meeting or two. But if you know you're going to be in Spain for 7 months, in the middle, if you know you go to the Bahamas for 2 months every year, right in the middle of search, please rethink putting your name in the hopper. Every church does the way they do nominations differently. You will be asked, you will not be voluntold to serve, no matter how the church does it. You will be asked if you are willing. We talk a lot about whether it's possible to nominate yourself, and every church decides for themselves how this works. But what I will say to you is this: if no one but you thinks that you should serve on this committee, I want you to think very hard about the wisdom of that. It may be that you represent a deeply underserved demographic that's too afraid to put their name forward. That may be true. If it is and they say you cannot self-nominate, then it's okay. Talk to a friend and say, I'd really like to be nominated. And here's why. Here's who I think I bring into the room. Otherwise, this is not about ego. And I want to stress that this is not a vanity position. Some people refer to it as, what did I ever do to you? It is amazing. It is joyous. It is rewarding. And when you get a new minister, and you were on that search committee who helped to bring that in, you will be the most excited person that you have been in a long time. But it's not about ego. It's also not about one-issue voting. If there is something that is so dear to your heart that you absolutely, positively, under no circumstances would consider a minister who did not support that thing, whether it's gun control or the death penalty, whatever it is, whatever your personal thing is, if it is so deeply and so dearly held, please consider, before you put your name forward or allow your name to be put forward, because you may disregard very perfect ministers for your congregation because they disagree with you about that one issue. Now, if this is something that the entire church agrees on, that's a little different. Because a minister who doesn't agree probably won't fit well. But if this is you and a subset of the church and not the entire church, think hard. It is hard saying to Unitarian Universalists that this is not a completely welcoming, democratic, totally friendly process where anyone can do it, but not everyone will be successful at doing it. The other piece that we do tell people quite strongly, now I'm sure all of you have met someone at some point in your life whose entire mission in life is to find a large pot of brown stuff and to stir it with a stick, who likes to watch the spatter, who likes the excitement and the churn and the getting something going. Or maybe they're just a gadfly. Maybe they like to play devil's advocate over and over again. This is not the person you want on this search committee. The search committee, whenever they speak, must speak with one voice. You will never hear any dissension. What you hear out of the search committee will be, this is the word from the search committee. You do not want a search committee that spends 90% of their time arguing for the sake of argument, trying out every straw man, every possibility, every distant, totally improbable scenario. It's not worth it. If that is your favorite thing in the world to do, is to be a gadfly, is to poke at things to see if they'll explode, this is probably not going to be a productive place for you to be. Doing this work is joyous. And getting to learn the congregation to this extent is amazing. If you have the time, let yourself be nominated because it is absolutely awesome. It is a fun process. And by the time it is over, you will know the ins and outs of your congregation better than you ever thought you could. Right now, if you sign on, we would probably start sometime late January, early March with the retreat. And you would kick off from then, and it's possible we could do that earlier depending on how quick you guys are. We will talk about that in a sec. You are starting on a great journey. And it's going to be amazing. There are some incredible ministers coming into Search next year. You have the potential to have someone travel with you for the next 7 to 10 years or more that is just incredible. And I look forward to being with you on this journey. So I'm going to stop now for a minute and I'm going to ask, what questions do you have at this point in the process before we do slides? Does anyone have questions? I'm also, one of the other hats I wear is I am the administrator and the moderator for the entire UUMA Collegial Ministers Board. So I have 1,100 ministers who talk to each other on this board. So I have a darn good idea who's going into Search next year because we all gab.
I'm going to pass this around.
You may not have these numbers, but rough estimates are good. I'd love to know of those 1,100 ministers or however many UUA ministers we have, about what percentage of them are women, people of color, LGBTQ?
That is an awesome question. We passed 50% being women about 5 years ago. So we are at over 60% women. We are at about 2% of us that are genderqueer, transgender, or just non-gender affiliated. We are still low on ministers of color. Right now, I think the last number I heard was under 200 in the whole UUA, and we were probably actually, if we were talking about ministers who identify as black, we are probably talking about less than 50. Ministers who identify as mixed race, as I do, you're probably talking about another 50 or 60. We do have, I would guess, and this is a guess, I would guess about 10% of our ministers identify as having some type of disability, but not all those are visible. For example, you can't tell that I'm deaf because I wear heavy-duty digital hearing aids and they amplify the heck out of everything.
Yes. You mentioned that there may be 10 or 15 names that may click on you. I think those were your words. That seems to me to be a rather passive process where we advertise and we hope for responses. What about headhunting? What about going out and actually contacting people we know in the denomination that might be a good fit for us, rather than waiting for them to come to us?
Okay, so let me give you the good answer and let me give you the non-politically correct answer. Any minister who is in good standing with UUMA, if you come up to me and you say, hey, we're in search, would you be interested? And that minister's not already in search, you're probably just going to get a flat no. Because of the havoc it causes, because we have to go back then and create our packet and do all those pieces if we don't already have that ready to go. The honest answer is you can talk to anybody you darn well please. And if the minister's really ready to jump ship on their congregation or has been kind of thinking about it, if it's during your search process and you say to them, hey, you're really good, would you consider, you're allowed to do that. There's nothing that stops you. The only piece I would advise you to be cautious about is going outside of the denomination. It happens at times, but I had a young Episcopal minister take a congregation up in Wisconsin a couple years ago. That poor man had no idea what search was, or General Assembly was, or ministerial clusters. He's up there by himself at because they didn't tell him. They just offered him a job. So be aware of all the pieces you need to fill in if you do go way outside the search process. But yeah, you can certainly, if you're actively in search and there's somebody that you guys just know is amazing, you can float it to them, but they just need to get their packet in and go through the search process and click on you, and you're still well within bounds. Okay, next question.
If you're on the committee, is there any particular usual day or evening that they meet? Would be Sunday or Tuesday, or would they have to decide at the retreat? Or I assume there's a whole lot of time they'd put in, but approximately, is there any day of the week or evening or anything like that?
Usually they decide based on who's in the room, who's on the committee. They will pick what day and time works for them. And I tell every committee, yes, you need to meet in person, at least once a month, get together in person. But in between, if you need to, you can use Zoom calls, conference calling, all kinds of technology. If that day doesn't work for somebody to drive or if somebody's night blind. But yeah, the committee picks date and time.
A quick question. Can a sitting board member be nominated for the search committee?
So I'm not quite sure what your group is doing yet.
We'll go over that in my slides.
Okay, so they will cover that. We've talked about it and they've reached a decision, so.
Having served on a search committee several ministers ago, I recall that the UUA sent us a list of people that they thought that we should consider. That's not happening now, I believe.
So, right, they will send you the list of people who clicked on you, who were willing to be considered, and if there is somebody that probably shouldn't have clicked on you because they don't have enough experience, Keith Cron will talk to that person and say,
Thanks for listing the demographics of the candidate, but I just wonder, is there a mandate for, you might call it the Rooney Rule of UU, that search committees must look for someone who's not necessarily straight, must look for someone non-white or of a different gender or gender questioning?
Great question. No, there is not a mandate that. What we say to you is, look, do beyond categorical thinking so that your brains aren't just set for the 50-year-ago model where it must be a straight white male with 2 kids and a wife who bakes cookies and plays the piano. We want you to be able to consider every person that might be a fit so that you don't deny yourselves. But if the right minister for you is a white, straight, male minister with 2.5 kids, a dog named Spot, whose wife plays piano and makes cookies, then by gosh, you call that minister. Don't you dare call somebody else.
I have two questions. The first is, could you talk about the time commitment? I think you might go over this later, like,
And it honestly, it varies. It could go as high as 20 hours a month at the beginning, and then it smooths way out. Like the two that I just finished working with, the last month or so was the bulk of their work, and the beginning was the bulk of the work, and in between they were like, 3-4 hours a month. It got rolling, and that's it. You do a lot at the end, you do a lot at the beginning, and it's a big breather in the middle.
second question, what if the church doesn't say yes?
What if the what?
The church doesn't vote yes. You bring in this great person, they give a sermon, you don't get 90%.
So it's very rare, but it does happen, and I mean very rare. Usually it's because something has come up in the middle of that reveals this person to not be who the search committee thought they were. When it happens, you go into second round immediately, which is a foreshortened, so you might go back to candidates, to pre-candidates that you had said no to, and say to them, hey, if you're not candidating somewhere, we'd like to talk with you. They might do a Zoom call with them, or maybe work out with them kind of what happened. Or you can start with a whole fresh new crop of pre-candidates and try it again, because sometimes people come in late to the search process. If all goes wrong and you don't get somebody, it's still okay. Better to do one more year in search with a good interim than to have a minister that doesn't fit and that will leave you in 2 years. But good questions.
Do you ever have the situation where you go through the search process and you get too few candidates to make a good choice? Either 2 or 1 or none?
It is very rare. It is possible to only get 1 or 2 candidates, but usually one of them is dead on for you. It is rare, but yet there are some churches that get nobody clicking on them. Usually when that happens, you guys don't fit any of these parameters. Usually it's a church that's under 100 people that is trying to offer full-time ministry at 2. They're barely making the pay rate, so nobody can afford to take them. It might be a church that's totally deviated from the standard contract, and everybody's too afraid to touch it because they've altered everything, and that usually means the congregation is so conflicted, and they can't even handle the standard contract, so it makes ministers nervous. Or you're in such a terrible high crime area that ministers see it as a dangerous place to be. You don't meet any of that. I could not imagine you all not getting a nice group of ministers interested.
In that regard, Reverend Brett had told us that the year that we selected him, we were the most sought after in numbers, and I think that will happen again.
I do too.
Yeah. We worked very hard on our interim package. Is that close to what you need for the final, or is it much different?
It's much bigger, but it's the same process, the same kind of, it's a different set of targeted skills, but yeah, it's darn close.
Hi, could you explain what you mean by someone clicking on it?
Sure. The way this works, it's a program online, and it comes up and it lists. Here's all the churches and what they want. Do they want a settled minister, a contract minister, an interim? And you go, you read across, and you tell it, I want to see more. and it brings you up the church's congregational record. That document is somewhere between 30 and 100 pages long, depending on how verbose people have gotten. Usually they run between 20 and 30, 35, but they can get extreme. And that's got every bit of information about your congregation. How many people, how your money flows, not who, but the amounts given by your biggest donors, how the donor breakdowns go, what's your leading theology, how many kids, how do you regard kids, every bit of info. And at the end of it, there's a button that says, click here if you're interested in letting them know that you're interested. So I click on that button, and on January 2nd, I'll be part of the list that goes to that congregation as, here's ministers who've read through our packet and like us, and are willing to be considered to be our called minister.
And the next step after that?
Next step after that, the search committee looks at that list, and they go to our ministerial records. And the poor souls get to read through between 20 and 30 pages apiece of ministerial record. They look at our websites, which tell all about us and all the things we do. And for any of you who have smartphones, like when you walk out of here today, if you Google Reverend Amy Petrie Shaw, my packet will come up, and you can get a look at what a ministerial packet looks like. And they will read through those, and they will select up to about 5 people. They may even do 10 if they're doing phone calls first, and they will talk to those people. And they will see if there's anything they like, but if there's anything that calls to them. And they will try to get to 4 or 5, somewhere between 1 and 5 people that they might want to do a Zoom call with. You can do more, but it gets unwieldy. And then they're going to select out of that bunch 1 to 4, maybe 5 at an outside to pre-candidate. They will go preach in that neutral pulpit. And then from that, they will select 1 to be your candidate. And when they select the candidate, you all will hear the name, and then everybody gets to Google us and see who we are and look up our packets.
So this is such a lengthy process. There's a lot of investment in time and energy and financial in going through all of this. I was a little disappointed that our prior minister was not able to stay with us longer than 5 years.
Yeah.
So it does beg the question in my mind, is there a minimum commitment time that a minister promises to stay?
So the reality is no, you can't make them make a minimum. The general answer, though, is most of our ministries last about 7 years. You want somebody, when you're talking to people, you want somebody who's not eyeing you as a stepping stone in the next 3 years. In Brett's case, he was called to something else and he couldn't say no, and the man struggled with it. But usually what you want is somebody who says to you, you know what, I'm here and I'm overjoyed to be here and I want to be here. You want somebody that at minimum wants to make a 3 to 5 year commitment, at absolute minimum. If they're saying to you, well, my husband might get called to California next year, and if he does, well, that would not be somebody that I would tell the search committee that this is a wise investment. Would I look at a 90-year-old minister? It would be more of a challenging call because, again, they might be there in 10 years, but they might not want to do that much work. It's more of a challenge. So you're looking at somebody who can commit 3 to 5 is absolute minimum. 7 is normal for the length of a ministry, and you prefer somebody who says, you know what, I want to be here as long as I can serve you, and as long as we can do good ministry together, I'm going to be here.
You mentioned contract and settled minister, and I'm sure a lot of people know this, but I am curious, what is the difference between the contract minister and the settled minister?
Good question. A settled minister, your settled minister has been called by you, not hired. You still pay them. They have gone through the whole search process. They have been vetted, rigorously. A contract minister is here for a length of time, which is determined by the contract. So you might offer someone, if you didn't want to do the whole settlement process, you might offer them a 2-year contract, and you pay them, and at the end of that contract, they're gone. Some churches do contract to call, but that's normally tiny churches who say, look, we'll give you a 5-year contract, and if you help us grow to the point that we can afford you, and things are still going good at the end, then we'll call you. But it's a period of time ministry.
How is a neutral pulpit chosen?
Good question. So the search committee will look at the churches around you, bearing in mind that the congregation bears the cost if they have to travel an extreme distance. They will find up to 4 or 5 congregations around you that have pulpit dates that they will let you all agree to fill so that the candidate can come preach in one of those. It doesn't matter, you can do UU churches, or if the candidate is potentially Christian UU, or the congregation is primarily Christian, you can also ask the local UCC, or Disciples of Christ, or Quaker, if what you want to hear is more in those styles. That's fine too, as long as it's not yours and not theirs. Search committee. And basically, quite honestly, it's any church around you that has space and is willing to let you fill their pulpit that day. Because sometimes it's hard to get them. We also, I know one of my searches, I preached in an empty church at 2 o'clock because there simply were no neutral pulpits for a 2-hour drive around the church. Try making 8 members of a search committee sing hymns. It was great. Yeah. Ready?
Thanks so much, Reverend.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is just the highlights of the process, and not every detail is worked out to the end. We really want to focus on the very near-term next steps of choosing the search committee, okay? So this is the first step of, remember what she's saying, 18 months. So this is an important day. And I definitely feel the gravity of what Amy's saying without being too serious. This is important. So talk to people who aren't here today. Not everybody understands our whole process. So if someone asks you questions, take some time to explain what you've heard here today. This is being videotaped. This will be up on the website. Thank you, Gail, for that idea. And a link should be, if everything goes right technically, in the newsletter next week. So if somebody wasn't able to come, please encourage them to share her wonderful insights. The goal here is to take that first step and to find 7 people, because that's what our bylaws say, is we need a slate of 7 people to be on our search committee. And if you think about it, in August of September of 2020, there will be a person here who will be our senior minister. So it's exciting. What we need is an effective, efficient, solid search committee. So she went through many of the qualities we are looking for. But before we get on to that, this is the most important slide that I feel I have today. This is you. This is a representation of you thinking, reflecting, using all your qualities. So get a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee, put your phone down, put your New York Times down, and just think and reflect and pull up the directory of the church. I was sitting around looking in the congregation today, jotting down some names, right? That's the process that we want to go through. And talk to some people maybe, reflect, talk with your friends, talk to people you may not know as well, and take some time, but at the same time, not too much time because we are on a schedule here. Now we'll get to the nitty-gritty. This is a lot of, I hate to read slides, so I'm just going to pull out a few words that are important to me and the board as we talked about this. Open-minded people, people who can build a consensus, people who play well with others is the statement that Amy used once that I picked up and put in my head. Okay? That's essential because what if the whole thing goes south because there's some huge argument and blah, 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 blah. I'm sure you've heard stories about stuff like that before. Committed to pluralism, she really spoke to that point with the idea that you might have to represent another part of the congregation because of the limitations of only having 7 people. Understanding that pluralism, keeping confidences. Again, you can imagine what happens if words get out and lobbying, confidence is essential to this. Don't just nominate your acquaintances and friends. Again, think, reflect, and take some time with this. There's more about the time commitments on the form. The form actually has some roles that we need to fill. Don't obsess on that, and you don't have to vote on those roles and figure out who would be, you don't have to do that, but it just asks you to think about the other sort of skill-oriented things that we are going to need. Other tips about our nomination, this very first stage we're going to go through. Only UCE members can vote. You pick up the forms at the back as we exit today. You only get 1 form, so don't confuse us by putting 2 members in today and then 2 other forms next week and 1 more. Oh, I've changed my mind again. So I know that's a little balancing act you have to do. So again, focus, don't procrastinate, but yet reflect so that you get in what you are happy with. Your name must be on the form. This is Chicago. We don't want to get, everybody voting twice and all that, so hey. And we struggled with this one at the last, or I should say we debated this. Some people on the board thought, 1 person, everybody should do 1 person. Others said, no, it should be more. Somebody told the story, somebody put 30 names into the nomination process. Don't go there, please. We came up with this number to give everybody a frame of reference about what we kind of expect as a range, because we want it to be relatively fair. If you need 8 because it's gonna, you're gonna be up all night trying to, it's not meant to be a prohibition, but please don't give 30 names or 70 names or whatever high number we think of. Yeah.
One of the things that I tell people, yes, you absolutely may be able to think of 15 people. You may, really, really. But when you look at that list, we don't know, the board doesn't know, which of those 15 is number 1, and which is, they could probably do it. All those are going to get equaled out as, these are the 15 people that they want to nominate. If you look at that list and you think, well, Jim would certainly be number 1 and Steve would be number 15, if you can do it that easily, pare it down a little. This is your voice. Use it wisely.
And on a technicality, Andy, can you hold your question? Is that okay? I'd appreciate it. Thank you. On a technicality, we did at the last minute maybe add ranking on the nomination form for those 7. It only will be used if there's a tie-break situation, or as Amy says, it might be used, a little bit to get a sense of weighting. But we did ask for ranking, but mostly that was because of a tie-break situation, we thought. The deadline for this nomination stage for those forms at the back is January 25th. That's 2 Sundays that you have the opportunity to bring that form back and put it in the box in the back of the sanctuary. So this is where the no procrastination thing comes into play. You can turn it in the box. The box will be out in the lobby so that if you're here during the week, it's able to take your form. You can email your form to Miko, but remember, that's not just emailing to Miko, here's my 8 names. We need your signature, we want the actual form. So if you go scan it, or you have a scanner at home, you can do it that way. Really, it's much easier to come to church and get nourished, put your form in, and forget about email. But in a pinch, you're traveling, whatever, we wanted to give that opportunity to folks. After all those forms come in, so on January 26th, there's our committee, a couple people on the board. Janelle Britton and Jim Clark have been involved, so it'll definitely be them. It might be 1 more, maybe 2 more people if the bandwidth is not there and they need some extra help. They'll be counting those nominations. They'll rank everybody by the number of nominations they get, and they will start calling folks. And they will say, are you willing to serve on the search committee? Okay. At the same time, they'll ask you to fill out an application that has 2 or 3 very basic questions about the skills you have and why you think it's important to serve, a little bit about your UU philosophy. That information will be on the website and on the bulletin board, and the congregation will be notified to go and read that and think about that as they prepare to vote. The board will come up with a short list. If we have, 75, 80 people nominated, we have to shorten that up. And that is, we get there by those phone calls. So then you vote on the short list. We hope that'll be in February. We're not guaranteeing. We don't know how long that process will take to call those folks and get that short list. The top 4 people from that vote automatically become search committee members. The remaining 3 people for the search committee are appointed by the board, and that's for a couple reasons. One of those is we want to look at the skill set that those folks have. If they're all lovely people with lots of history and they know a lot about us as a congregation, but nobody's a good writer, or nobody's a project manager that's like good at details and deadlines, we want to balance that out a little bit. And also the diversity point that Reverend Amy already made, if it's all women, all LGBTQ people in that first 4, we want to balance that out and have better representation. That's how we get to our slate of 7, and then that's an up or down vote. So there's nomination, there's voting on the short list, and then there's a confirmation of those final 7 names. Then we celebrate, and they get to work. And I ask that you be very grateful to those people as they work so hard. As Amy portrayed, it's a lot of work. And so let's be very supportive of those folks while they go through this process and guide us through. And that's what I have. So Q&A. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, on the nomination board, it does explain a board member can be nominated, but the minute they decide to serve and are chosen, they must resign from the board. So they can't be on both things.
I'm just looking around the people who are here, and most of us are of a certain age. I don't know younger people's names, and I think younger people need to be on the search committee. Can I put on as one of my people a younger person or a parent of 2 kids rather than their name? Because I don't know their names.
I'm not sure how you could put that concern in, or go ahead and speak to it.
I would not put broad generalities because, Elsie, who is a young parent with 2 kids, may be terrible at everything other than being a mom with 2 kids and may care less about being, in any way involved. You'd be better served, you know, if you see people doing the work and you don't know their name, chase down somebody who does know. Talk to the DRE and say, who would you kind of recommend? Who do you think's doing good work in that area so that I can boost that signal and I can, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. You know, just ask people to help you find somebody in that demographic by name.
Yeah, and I would add, it depends what you mean by young. I mean, I spoke with somebody who's definitely under 40 this morning who told me that they were willing to serve. So, hey, in our church, young is a relative term, right? So, talk to each other. Look at their minutes. Looks like Harry's gone.
I just want to make a couple statements about the process. I've been a member of the congregation for 46 years. This is going to be the 5th search that I've witnessed, and many of you have the same sense. And most of the questions I heard were from people who haven't been through the process. I just want to say it'll work. It has worked. There's a number of people who have been on search committees in the past. I don't know if they want to be identified or not, but you could ask them what it was like. It'll be okay. Trust it.
Thanks for that. I think Reverend Amy said anxiety is one of those things that definitely happens at this stage, so those are very helpful words. And remember, you know, we're around, and email Janelle, Jim Clark, ask me, ask other board members. A lot of times I won't know the answer. I've learned to double check and recommend what the right answer is rather than sort of claim to know. So just ask questions too. And you remember, 2 Sundays, so I think we're good. The forms are right there by the box. Please take them and go.